My name is Nickel, and these are 10 weird facts about Doom. If you haven't checked out the other weird facts videos on the channel, or the gameplay, don't forget to check that out as well. Let's kick this off with number 1. The Columbine High School shooting is among the deadliest in US history, and violent video games, especially Doom, were a major target of public scrutiny following the massacre. In part, the focus came from the writings of one of the shooters, Eric Harris, which made frequent references to Doom in particular. Troublingly, Harris is quoted as saying that, "Doom is so burned into my head, my thoughts usually have something to do with the game." Apparently he played Doom as a way to relieve stress from facing bullying on a regular basis, and eventually he began to see it as a wish fulfillment. The connection isn't so tenuous, however. According to a student who played Doom online with Harris and Dylan Klebold, the shooters, Harris developed levels for the game using reverse-engineered software that was widely available online, including a simulation of the Columbine High School. Many of these levels, though not all of them, could be downloaded from Harris's blog. In his writings, he sketched and described other levels that he had planned to make, indicating the level of his preoccupation with the game. He compared the upcoming shooting that took place at Columbine High School to the game by saying, "It's gonna be like Doom." In the ensuing uproar, parents of the victims filed a lawsuit against several companies in the gaming industry, including Doom developer id Software. The suit sought punitive damages of $5 billion, claiming that, absent the obsession with the games and materials produced by the companies, the basic personalities of the shooters alone would not have led to the massacre being carried out. For the most part, these cases, including the case against Doom developers and producers, are dismissed on the grounds that media companies are protected by the First Amendment from product liability laws. A modified version of Doom called Marine Doom was created in accordance with the mandates by the General Officers Symposium for the US Marines to use as a supplement to field training. They stated that it was uniquely suited to the purposes of training people to kill due to its frenetic focus on making every second count. Players of Doom have to pull the trigger without a second thought to survive, and this behavior is ingrained through tens or hundreds of thousands of repetitions. Sergeant Dan Snyder, a Marine charged with exploring video games as a training method, said this about the justification of using Doom: "It's about repetitive decision making. We're trying to get these things ingrained by doing them over and over, with variations. Doom was the only game out there that fit the bill." Speaking before the New York State Legislature in 1999, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, a West Point Academy professor of psychology and military science, claimed that violent video games serve as, quote, "firearms training devices at best and murder simulators at worst." He makes the case that because a psychological twitch state occurs when getting absorbed in a fast-paced shooter, children may unexpectedly develop an efficient killer instinct. He referenced that Michael Carniel, the 14-year-old who inflicted the Paducah school shooting, who had next to no former firearm training, was able to fire 8 rounds hitting 8 students due to his video game pedigree. 4 of the shots hit students in the head, 1 in the neck, and 3 in the upper chest. According to Grossman, nowhere in the annals of military, law enforcement, or criminal history can any of us find an equivalent achievement, and this from a 14-year-old boy with no previous experience in firing a handgun. Congressional hearings in 1993 concerning the potential need for video game regulation centered primarily on 3 games: Night Trap, Mortal Kombat, and Doom. Their depictions of violence were, at the time, considered the first realistic simulations that might entice the impressionable players to imitate them. Mortal Kombat developer Midway made concessions to this, including releasing a less gory version of the game, while Sega, which published Night Trap, pulled the game from production. Doom, which had already attracted a wide following via leaked alpha versions of the game, and released concurrently with the Senate hearings, responded by distributing the game freely for download as shareware, encouraging people to copy, modify, and distribute to their heart's content. Because of this, it quickly became the 7th most widely distributed game up to that point. But distributing it this way was, in effect, the industry's nuclear option. At the time, internet censorship was barely a twinkle in Congress's eye, so id Software's move to distribute freely sidestepped any proposal on the table to put censoring duties in the hands of the government. But by 1994, the ESRB was created and tasked the private sector with rating its games on a voluntary basis for the recommendation of retailers. It's in large part to id Software's distinctly anti-establishment efforts that video game distribution is still under the purview of the private sector, rather than the government. And in a way, they were rewarded because of this, with massive sales making Doom 2 the 3rd best-selling game in history following its release. The violence depicted in the Doom series caused Germany's federal agency, the BPJM, to ban Doom and Doom 2 in 1994. The BPJM's strict policies against video game violence have loosened over the years. However, it still took 17 years to lift the ban on Doom. In 2011, the games were finally available to the German public. Many game companies have had to release censored versions of their games in Germany, and some have gone so far as to censor major elements, which was the only way that games such as Grand Theft Auto 5 and Counter-Strike could be released in Germany. Surprisingly, in February of 2016, it was announced that the newest installment of the Doom series will be released completely uncensored in Germany. Bethesda's Pete Hines made the announcement via Twitter. Today we announced that Doom will be 100% uncut in Germany, no changes. Pretty amazing, given how long previous Doom games were banned there. The E1M4 level in the original Doom contained a swastika symbol. This was meant to be a reference to Wolfenstein 3D, another id Software game. However, the developers changed the symbol in version 1.4 of the game, aiming to avoid the potential controversy it would have caused. This also occurred in Commander Keen 5, another id Software game. As John Romero, one of Doom's developers, remarked, "Yes, there is a swastika in one of the levels, one of my levels to be exact, but I removed it shortly after the game was released because people were upset that an evil symbol was in a cute kids game. It was a premonition of things to come, namely Wolfenstein 3D. I also put a swastika in Doom's E1M4 as a Wolf 3D reference, but I changed it later for the exact same reason." Many of the songs on the original Doom soundtrack sound so similar to songs from popular rock and metal bands that composer Bobby Prince has been accused of stealing the music. There are plenty of comparison videos on YouTube that you can see for yourself that demonstrate the similarities between the Doom music and songs from artists such as Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and AC/DC. Some songs are nearly identical, and many others are too uncanny to be considered coincidental. Suspicions were solidified in 2007 when John Romero released unused Doom tracks. The metadata within these tracks contain information on which songs were used as inspiration. Some unused tracks were later released in Doom 2, such as Bye Bye American Pie, for which the metadata reads Alice in Chains, Dirt, Them Bones. This was one such song that many Doom 2 players recognized as seeming almost identical to the Alice in Chains song. However, legal action was never taken by any of these bands. Being distributed first as Shareware, id Software had to be creative to get its product on store shelves. The company opted to package the game, which had been distributed in 3 episodes, as one game with the final episode included, and offer it to retailers at no cost. And it asked for nothing in return. If the retailer would package it and give it the shelf space, they were entitled to keep all of the revenue. Consequently, Doom became ubiquitous with PC gaming. Gabe Newell said of Doom that it was the most used program in the US, ahead of even Windows. It was perhaps the first killer app in that an operating system that couldn't run it was forced to scramble to port it in order to maintain relevance. The cultural phenomenon of Doom was so widespread that it presented an unforeseen burden to computer networks that they often couldn't handle. Workplaces and university campuses alike began battling back immediately. Carnegie Mellon's network admin posted a message within hours of the game's release asking students to avoid playing Doom in networked mode. The notice threatened to disconnect computers found playing the game. Texas A&M began manually deleting it one by one, and a lab supervisor at the University of Louisville created a program to detect and delete Doom, which goes to show how widespread it was. Lotus Development and Intel banned Doom from its computers. Even the offices of id Software weren't immune. They found themselves victims of their own creation after boasting in a press release that the game would be expected to be, quote, the #1 cause of decreased productivity in business around the world. As described in the book Masters of Doom, it took extreme measures for one Doom developer, John Carmack, to get John Romero, another Doom developer, out of his locked office because he was continuously playing Doom. The book claims that Carmack chopped his way through the door with a battle axe, the remains of which littered the hall for months. In 2011, after 3 years of work on the 4th Doom game, the developers scrapped the game because they felt it was too similar to Call of Duty and needed to be reworked. Bethesda's vice president of public relations stated, "We decided that it wasn't Doom enough and needed to be thrown out and started over. You can probably close your eyes and imagine a Call of Doom or a Battle Doom game, where it starts to feel way too much like, wait, this doesn't feel like Doom. It feels like we're playing some other franchise with a Doom skin on it." More than a decade after the advent of Doom, id Software's identity was in flux. The company was bought by ZeniMax Media in 2009, which brought with it a higher budget and manpower, and initially offered id developers more or less free rein to develop as they liked. During this time, Carmack couldn't convince ZeniMax to allow him and his team to put all of their efforts into virtual reality development. Instead, ZeniMax made plans for id Software to develop a new first-person shooter series. This would eventually become Rage. ZeniMax's priority was then a Doom reboot, a project which after years in development could scarcely get off the ground. The friction between the gradually tighter-fisted parent company and the existing development team led both to become disenchanted with the project. Ultimately, this led Carmack and an entourage of programmers to depart from id Software and pursue virtual reality with the Kickstarter startup Oculus Rift. In early 2014, ZeniMax sent a formal notice of its claims to portions of the intellectual property used in the development of the Oculus Rift. Facebook, who was the parent company of the Oculus by then, retaliated and claimed that ZeniMax could not identify any stolen code or technology in the Rift's open source. According to the America Invents Act of 2011, the first company to file for ownership of the patents is the owner of the intellectual property. ZeniMax has seemingly dropped the issue, indicating that Facebook holds the patents. In the Oculus's original Kickstarter video, they stated that the dev kit would include Doom 3 BFG Edition, which was the first Oculus-ready game. Presumably, this was due to Carmack's involvement. The final fact is that hitting the like button might give you something. If you hit the like button and it does give you something, let me know what it was down below in the comments. As usual, I'll post some of those comments on Twitter. My name is Nickel, and lately I've been doing some gameplay on the channel, which you can see here. But I'll leave you with a preview of a previous Weird Facts video, in case you haven't checked it out yet. Weird Facts, Dark Souls. If you want to see the full thing, just hit the I button in the corner of the screen. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Two brothers, Michael and David, went to court with a friend, Thomas, over Dark Souls. The case was broadcast across the United Kingdom via ITV, which is a UK TV network. So here's what happened. In a drunken state at the Glastonbury Music Festival, Thomas promised his friend Michael and brother David that he could beat Dark Souls on the hardest difficulty in under a year before the next Glastonbury. He even claimed that it would be very easy. However, when a year had passed and Thomas had yet to beat the game, his friend and brother took him to court on television and sued him for a whopping